"You can sleep in the garage, Mom," my daughter, Ashley, said, her voice devoid of even a shred of hesitation. She stood in the doorway of the beautiful colonial house I had paid for, her arms crossed over her silk blouse, blocking the warmth of the foyer from reaching me. Outside, the November rain was freezing, a relentless drizzle that soaked through my thin, worn-out coat. I shivered, gripping the handle of my battered suitcase, a prop I had bought at a thrift store 3 months ago for $5. "The garage?" I repeated, my voice trembling, not just from the cold, but from the sheer icy shock of it. "Ashley, it's 40 degrees out here. There's no insulation in there. It's just concrete and oil stains." "We have guests coming this weekend, Mom," she sighed, rolling her eyes as if my basic need for warmth was a massive inconvenience to her social calendar. "Important investors for Mark's new project. We need the guest room. The garage has a space heater. You'll be fine. It's just for a few days. Don't be so dramatic." "Don't be so dramatic." I looked at her, my beautiful golden-haired daughter, the girl I had given everything to. The girl whose private school tuition I had paid without blinking, whose first car was a Mercedes, whose down payment on this very house had been a wedding gift that drained what she thought was the last of my savings. She looked at me with pure annoyance. To her, I was just an old, broke widow who had outlived her usefulness, a burden, a stain on her perfect suburban life. "Mark says he doesn't want you wandering around the house while they're here," she added, delivering the final blow with a casual cruelty that took my breath away. "It's embarrassing, Mom. Look at you. You look like, well, you know." I looked down at my scuffed shoes and my frayed coat. Yes, I looked poor. That was the point. That was the test. And she had failed. Spectacularly. Something inside me, a fragile hope I had been nursing for 90 days, finally shattered. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Instead, it was replaced by a cold, steel-hard resolve. "I understand," I said softly. Ashley looked relieved. She thought I was submitting. She thought I was going to trudge over to the detached garage, curl up on a cot next to the lawnmower, and stay out of sight like a good little poor relation. "Good," she said, reaching for the door handle. "Here's the key to the side door. Don't come into the main house unless it's an emergency." I didn't take the key. "I won't need that," I said. "What? Where are you going?" Her brow furrowed in confusion. I didn't answer. I turned my back on her, on the house I bought, on the ungrateful child I raised, and I walked down the driveway. "Mom," she called out, her voice tinged with irritation, not concern. "Mom, stop. You can't walk to town in this rain. You don't have any money." I kept walking. I walked right past the mailbox, to the curb of the main road. I reached into the deep pocket of my ragged coat and pressed a single button on the small, black device I had kept hidden there for 3 months. Less than 30 seconds later, headlights cut through the gloom. It wasn't a taxi. It wasn't a bus. It was a long, gleaming, obsidian-black Bentley Mulsanne. It moved silently, like a shark through dark water, and pulled up smoothly to the curb right in front of me. I heard the front door of the house open again. Ashley had stepped out onto the porch, shielding her eyes from the rain, her mouth hanging open. The driver's door opened. A man in an impeccable dark suit stepped out, ignoring the rain. He walked around the car, opened a large black umbrella, and held it over me. "Good evening, Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice respectful, deep, and familiar. "I trust you are ready to leave?" "Yes, James," I said, handing him my thrift store suitcase. "I am very ready. The penthouse suite at the Ritz-Carlton is prepared for you, madam. The staff has drawn a bath, and Chef Henri is preparing your usual dinner." "Thank you, James. That sounds perfect." I glanced back at the house, one last time. Ashley was standing on the porch, frozen, the rain soaking her silk blouse, staring in absolute disbelief. She looked small. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I simply slid into the warm, leather-scented interior of the car. James closed the door with a solid, reassuring thud, sealing out the cold, the rain, and my daughter. "To the hotel, madam?" "To the hotel, James," I replied, leaning back into the seat and closing my eyes, and block my daughter's number. As the heavy door of the Bentley latched shut, the silence wrapped around me like a thick velvet blanket. The freezing rain, the biting wind, and the look of sheer, unadulterated annoyance on my daughter's face were instantly locked away. James moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had served my family for 20 years. He didn't ask questions. He simply reached into the small refrigerator console and poured a glass of sparkling water, placing it gently in my hand. "Are you warm enough, madam?" he asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "I am now, James," I whispered, my hand still shaking slightly as I clutched the cold glass. I leaned back into the hand-stitched leather seats, closing my eyes. The contrast was nauseating. 5 minutes ago, I was being banished to a concrete box next to a lawnmower. Now I was sitting in a vehicle that cost more than the average American home. But the luxury didn't bring me comfort tonight. It only sharpened the pain. It highlighted exactly what I had done wrong. You see, Ashley wasn't born cruel. I made her that way. I looked out the tinted window as the city lights began to blur past. In my mind, I didn't see the wet streets. I saw Ashley at 5 years old, dressed in a designer velvet dress, screaming because she wanted the blue pony, not the pink one. I bought her both. I saw her at 16, crashing her brand new convertible 2 weeks after she got her license. I didn't make her take the bus. I bought her a safer, more expensive SUV the next day. I saw her at 25, demanding a wedding that cost $250,000 to a man I knew was weak and ambitious. Mark. I wrote the check. I was the yes mother. My husband, Robert, had been the stern one, the one who tried to teach them the value of $1. But after Robert passed away 10 years ago, leaving me with the Sterling Hotel Group, an empire of 30 luxury properties across the globe, I poured my grief into spoiling my only child. I thought I was giving her the life I never had. I thought I was buying her happiness. I was wrong. I was buying her love. And the moment the money stopped flowing, I learned the hardest lesson a mother can learn. The love stopped, too. 3 months ago, I sat in my penthouse office overlooking Central Park, staring at a photo of Ashley and Mark on their yacht, a yacht I paid for. They hadn't called me in 6 weeks. Not for my birthday. Not to ask how I was. Just a text from Mark. "Hey Mom, thinking about expanding the garage. Could use a loan." That was the moment the doubt that had been gnawing at me for years finally turned into a decision. I needed to know. Did my daughter love me, the woman who raised her? Or did she love the CEO of Sterling Hotels? So I devised the test. It was meticulous. I instructed my lawyers to freeze my personal access to the main accounts, setting up a temporary untouchable trust. I grew out my dyed hair, letting the gray roots show. I went to thrift stores in the next town over, buying coats that smelled of mothballs and shoes that pinched my toes. Then, I showed up at Ashley's door with a single suitcase and a lie. I lost it all, honey. I had wept, playing the part of the foolish widow. Bad investments. The market crashed. The hotel group is in receivership. They took the penthouse. They took everything. I remember the look on her face that day. It wasn't concern. It wasn't fear for me. It was panic for herself. "What about my allowance?" she had asked. That was her first question. Not "Are you okay?" but "What about my money?" When I told her there was no more money, the mask fell. The warmth evaporated. She didn't kick me out immediately. She was too worried about what the neighbors would think. But she made it clear. I was no longer the matriarch. I was a charity case. For 90 days, I lived in the guest room of the house I bought. I became the invisible woman. "Mom, don't come out when Mark's friends are here. Your clothes are depressing." "Mom, can you do the dishes?" "Since you're not working, you should contribute." "Mom, we're going out to dinner. There's some leftover meatloaf in the fridge." I endured it. I swallowed the insults like bitter pills, telling myself, "Give her time. She's stressed. She's adjusting. Deep down, she loves you." I washed their dishes. I mended their clothes. I watched them eat steak while I ate cold leftovers. I waited for a single spark of kindness, a hug, a thank you, a cup of tea. But tonight was the finale. Tonight, Mark had landed a meeting with the Sterling Group, my company. He didn't know I was the owner. He only knew them as the mysterious investors looking for prime real estate. He was desperate to impress them. And apparently, having a poor mother in the house was a liability he couldn't afford. The garage, I whispered to the empty air of the car. James caught my eye in the mirror. "Madam?" "Nothing, James. Just thinking." We were pulling up to the Ritz-Carlton now. The massive, golden-lit awning was a beacon in the rain. The doorman, seeing the Bentley, snapped to attention. They knew me here. Not as the poor widow, not as the nuisance in the garage. They knew me as Margaret Sterling, the owner. I touched the door handle, feeling the cold metal. My heart was broken, shattered by the girl I had worshipped since the day she was born. But as the doorman opened the car door and the warm, scented air of the hotel lobby rushed out to meet me, I felt something else rising beneath the grief. Ashley wanted to impress the Sterling Group? She wanted to play in the big leagues? Well, she was about to find out exactly who ran the league. "James," I said, stepping out of the car, my thrift store shoes hitting the red carpet. "Yes, Mrs. Sterling? Call my lawyers. Tell them to prepare the eviction protocol for the property on Elm Street, and tell them to cancel Ashley's credit cards. All of them." "With pleasure, madam." I walked into the lobby, head held high. The test was over. The lesson was about to begin. The bathwater in the Ritz-Carlton penthouse was scented with lavender and bergamot, a stark contrast to the mildew and damp earth smell that clung to the guest room Ashley had assigned me 3 months ago. I sank deeper into the bubbles, closing my eyes, but the luxury couldn't wash away the memory of the last 90 days. It played in my mind like a black and white horror film. The guest room hadn't really been a room. It was a glorified storage closet on the ground floor, barely large enough for a twin mattress. Ashley had needed the actual guest bedrooms for her yoga studio and Mark's home office, a room where he played video games and pretended to be a real estate mogul. I remembered the second week. I had been scrubbing their kitchen floor on my knees because Ashley said the mop didn't get the corners when Mark walked in with his friends. "Who's the old lady?" one of them had asked, not whispering. Mark hadn't said, "That's my mother-in-law, the woman who paid for this floor." He had laughed, a nervous, dismissive sound. "Oh, that's just. She's helping out. A distant relative down on her luck. We're doing a good deed." A good deed. I remembered dinner 3 nights ago. They had ordered sushi from the most expensive place in town. I watched them eat, the smell of fresh tuna and wasabi filling the air. When I walked into the kitchen, hoping for a roll, Ashley had pointed to the counter. "There's some bread left, Mom. And I think there's a can of soup in the pantry. We didn't order extra. Sushi is pricey, you know." I had eaten cold tomato soup out of the can because I didn't want to dirty a bowl and get yelled at. I opened my eyes, staring at the golden faucets of the hotel tub. That tomato soup had been the turning point. That was when I knew. There was no redemption for them. There was no misunderstanding. They weren't stressed. They were rotten. Meanwhile, 5 miles away, in the house on Elm Street, Ashley slammed the front door, shaking the rain from her hair. She turned to Mark, her face flushed not with guilt, but with high-octane annoyance. "Can you believe her?" she huffed, stomping into the living room and pouring herself a large glass of wine. The drama, walking off into the rain like some tragic heroine. Where does she think she's going? The shelter? Mark was pacing, running a hand through his hair. He looked less annoyed and more worried, but not about me. "Who cares where she went, Ash? The point is, she's gone. And thank God. Do you know how hard it would have been to explain her to the Sterling Group reps tomorrow?" He gestured around the room, which was cluttered with my depressing presence, a shawl I'd left on a chair, a book on the side table. He picked up the book and tossed it into the trash. "We need this place to look pristine. Success breeds success. If they see a bag lady living in our hallway, they're going to think we're running a charity, not a high-end development firm." I know. Ashley took a sip of wine, pacing to the window. "It's just the entitlement. We took her in. We gave her a roof. And she acts like we're the bad guys because we asked for a little space during the biggest meeting of your life." "She'll be back," Mark said dismissively. "She has nowhere else to go. She'll come crawling back in 2 days, hungry and sorry. And then we can set some new ground rules. Maybe the garage isn't such a bad idea long term. It's private." "True," Ashley mused, a cruel smile touching her lips. "It keeps the mothball smell out of the main house." "Focus, babe," Mark snapped his fingers. Tomorrow. The Sterling Group. This deal is worth $5 million. If we get the green light on the waterfront project, we are set for life. We can finally buy that vacation home in Cabo and stop worrying about people like your mother dragging us down. You're right. Ashley straightened her silk blouse. What time is the meeting? 1 p.m. lunch. And guess where? Mark grinned, a look of pure, avaricious hunger in his eyes. Where? The Ritz-Carlton. The main dining room. They want to treat us, they said. Ashley squealed, clapping her hands. The Ritz. Oh my God, Mark, that's perfect. It's so high class. We fit right in there. Back in the penthouse, I stepped out of the bath and wrapped myself in a plush robe. My phone buzzed on the marble vanity. It was a text from James. Mr. Sterling, Mark, has confirmed the lunch meeting for tomorrow at 1 p.m. Table 4. I have taken the liberty of reserving Table 5 for you, madam. I looked at the phone and smiled. It wasn't the soft smile of a mother. It was the sharp, cold smile of a CEO who had just spotted a hostile takeover target. They wanted to fit in at the Ritz? They were about to find out that they were just guests. I was the landlord. James, I texted back. Perfect. And tell Chef Henri I'll need my special outfit prepared, the red one. It was time to dress for the slaughter. The next morning, I woke up at 10 a.m. I hadn't slept past 7 a.m. in 20 years. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, cool and crisp, and for a moment, just a fleeting second, I reached for the old, scratchy blanket I had used in Ashley's guest room. Then I remembered. I sat up, the city skyline filling the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. It was a bright, cold November day. The rain had stopped, scrubbing the city clean. It was a perfect day for an execution. I ordered breakfast, eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, and a pot of Earl Grey. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, watching the news on the flat-screen TV. At 11:30, the stylist arrived. James had called her. She brought the dress. It wasn't a dress, really. It was a weapon made of crimson silk. A tailored, sharp-shouldered power suit in the deepest, bloodiest red imaginable. It was the kind of outfit that screamed money, power, and zero tolerance for nonsense. I put it on. I applied my makeup sharp eyeliner, red lipstick that matched the suit. I pulled my hair back into a severe, elegant chignon. I put on my diamonds, the real ones, not the paste replicas I had worn for the last 3 months. When I looked in the mirror, the poor widow was gone. Margaret Sterling, the shark, stared back. At 12:45 p.m., a yellow taxi pulled up to the entrance of the Ritz-Carlton. I watched from the balcony as Ashley and Mark stepped out. They tried to look like they belonged, but I knew them too well. I saw the nervousness in Mark's fidgeting hands. I saw the way Ashley smoothed her skirt 3 times in 5 seconds. They looked like children playing dress-up in their parents' clothes. They walked into the lobby, heads held high, oblivious to the fact that the very carpet they walked on was paid for by the woman they had kicked out into the rain less than 24 hours ago. I took the private elevator down. The maître d'Henri met me at the entrance to the dining room. He bowed slightly. "Mrs. Sterling," he murmured. "They are seated at table 4. Your guests, Mr. Henderson and Miss Klein from the acquisitions department, are with them. They have been briefed." "Excellent, Henry." "And table 5? "Ready, madam. The partition is discreetly placed." I walked in. The dining room was a symphony of clinking crystal and hushed conversations. I moved silently to table 5, which was situated directly behind table 4, separated only by a high decorative screen of frosted glass and lush greenery. I could sit there, unseen, and hear every word. I sat down, my back to the screen. James poured me a glass of water. "Showtime," I whispered. I heard chairs scraping on the other side of the screen. "Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling," a deep male voice said. That was Henderson, my most ruthless negotiator. "Welcome to the Ritz. Thank you for joining us. Please, call me Mark." My son-in-law's voice oozed charm, slick and fake. "And this is my lovely wife, Ashley. We're thrilled to be here. We've heard so much about the Sterling Group. We are very interested in your proposal regarding the waterfront development, Miss," Klein said, her voice professional and cool. "But before we proceed to the funding, we need to verify your assets. The liquidity you mentioned in your email, the house on Elm Street, is it?" My breath hitched. I leaned closer to the screen. "Oh yes," Mark said, his voice booming with confidence. "Fully owned, no mortgage, appraised at 1.5 million. It's our primary collateral. Liar. I had paid for that house. The deed was in Ashley's name, yes, but there was a lien on it, a private lien held by my trust, which they knew nothing about. They couldn't leverage it for a dime without my signature." "That is impressive," Henderson said. "And you have no other liabilities? Dependents living on the property?" There was a pause. I could practically hear Ashley sipping her wine nervously. "Well," Ashley's voice piped up, high and tight, "we do have a situation. My mother." "Your mother, miss?" Klein asked. She's destitute," Ashley sighed, the sound of a martyr bearing a heavy cross. "She lost everything. Bad decisions, gambling, we suspect. She showed up at our door 3 months ago with nothing. Gambling," my hands clenched into fists on the white tablecloth. "We took her in, of course," Mark added, sounding benevolent. "We're family, but she's difficult, mentally unstable. We've had to keep a close eye on her. It's been so hard on us," Ashley continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She wanders the house at night. She scares the neighbors. We're looking into facilities. For her own good, of course. We can't have her jeopardizing our business image." "Facilities," Henderson repeated neutral. "I see." In fact, Mark chuckled, a cruel, dismissive sound that made my blood boil. "We had to move her to the detached guest suite yesterday, just to keep the main house professional. For meetings like this, the detached guest suite, the garage. She's happy there," Ashley lied effortlessly. "She prefers the quiet." I had heard enough. I signaled to James. He stood up and moved the decorative screen aside with a smooth, deliberate motion. The barrier vanished. I slowly swiveled my chair around. Mark was mid-laugh, a glass of expensive scotch raised in his hand. Ashley was smiling that practiced, socialite smile. They froze. The laugh died in Mark's throat, turning into a wet choking sound. Ashley's eyes went wide, staring at me. They didn't see the bag lady in the thrift store coat. They saw a woman in a crimson suit that cost more than their car, dripping in diamonds, sitting at the head table of the Ritz-Carlton, looking at them with eyes cold enough to freeze hell. "Hello, Ashley," I said, my voice cutting through the silence of the dining room like a guillotine blade. "I believe you were talking about me." "Mom?" Ashley whispered. The word came out strangled, a tiny squeak of air escaping a throat constricted by sheer terror. She looked at my suit. She looked at the diamond necklace, the one she had begged me for 5 years ago, the one I had told her was in a safety deposit box for a rainy day. She looked at the waiters hovering attentively behind my chair, their heads bowed in deference. You found your clothes?" Mark stammered, his brain clearly misfiring, trying to reconcile the bag lady in his garage with the Titan sitting 5 feet away. You look great, Margaret. Really, we were just joking about the facilities. You know, business talk. Icebreakers." I didn't even look at him. I kept my eyes locked on Henderson. "Mr. Henderson," I said coolly, "I apologize for the interruption. I believe you were discussing collateral?" Henderson didn't hesitate. He didn't look confused. He looked at me with the absolute respect due to the person who signed his 7-figure paychecks. "We were, Mrs. Sterling," he said, nodding gravely. "Mr. Sterling here was just explaining how the property on Elm Street is fully owned and unencumbered. Is that so?" I turned my gaze back to Mark. He was sweating now, huge beads of perspiration popping out on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Actually," I said, reaching into my crimson clutch and pulling out a slim, folded document James had handed me in the car. "I believe there's a misunderstanding regarding the title." I slid the paper across the table. It glided over the starched white tablecloth and came to rest right next to Mark's scotch. "That is a copy of the deed," I said, "and the attached lien." Mark stared at it. "Lien? There's no lien. We paid cash. You paid cash." "I did," I agreed pleasantly. "I paid cash. And when the deed was drawn up, I had my lawyers include a reversionary clause tied to a private trust. Specifically, the Robert and Margaret Sterling Trust. Did you never read the fine print, Mark? The house belongs to Ashley, as long as I allow it. It reverts to the trust immediately upon any attempt to leverage it for commercial debt, or upon the beneficiary demonstrating moral turpitude or failure to provide duty of care. Duty of care? Ashley squeaked. I believe kicking your mother out into the rain to sleep in a garage constitutes a failure of care, I said, taking a sip of my water. Wouldn't you agree, Miss Klein? Miss Klein, my shark of a lawyer posing as an acquisition manager, adjusted her glasses. Legally speaking, madam, it is a textbook violation. The reversion is automatic. As of. She checked her Rolex. Approximately 20 minutes ago, when the legal courier filed the paperwork at the county clerk's office, the property on Elm Street belongs to the Sterling Hotel Group. Mark turned a color I had never seen on a human face before. It was a sickly, grayish green. You own the house? He whispered. I own the house, I corrected, and frankly, I'm not happy with the current tenants. They're messy, they're loud, and they treat the help, specifically the elderly woman they forced to scrub their floors, very poorly. Mom, please. Ashley stood up, her hands shaking as she reached toward me. We didn't mean it. We were stressed. This deal means everything to us. We were going to use the money to take care of you. We were going to build you a suite. A real one. Sit down, Ashley, I said. I didn't raise my voice, but the command cracked like a whip. Saturday. You weren't going to build me a suite, I said, my voice dropping to a register of deadly calm. You were going to put me in a state-run facility. I saw the brochures in your trash can, Mark. Sunset Pines, the one with the 1-star rating and the history of health code violations. Mark flinched. And as for this deal, I turned to Henderson. Report, please. The waterfront project is a viable asset, Henderson said formally. However, the partners listed on the application, Mark and Ashley Sterling, have failed the due diligence phase. Failed? Mark choked out. How? We have the credit score. We have the vision. You have the arrogance. I cut in. But you lack the capital, and more importantly, you lack the character. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, my diamond rings flashing under the chandelier lights. You wanted to meet the Sterling Group, Mark? You wanted to swim with the big fish? Well, here we are. I am the Sterling Group. I built this company from the ground up after your father-in-law died. I expanded it into 3 continents. I am the board. I am the CEO. I am the money. The realization hit them like a physical blow. Ashley's mouth fell open. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. You? Ashley whispered. But you bake cookies. You watch soap operas. I watched you, I corrected. I watched you for 3 months. I watched you treat me like a dog. I watched you sneer at my clothes. I watched you eat steak while I ate soup. I was conducting a performance review, honey. And you didn't just fail. You were fired. I signaled to Henri, the maitre d'. He appeared instantly with a silver tray. On it was a single folded white envelope. He placed it in front of Mark. What is this? Mark asked, his voice trembling. That, I said, is the eviction protocol. You have 24 hours to vacate the property on Elm Street. Anything left behind will be donated to charity. The locks will be changed at noon tomorrow. You can't do this, Ashley screamed. Heads turned all over the restaurant. The sheer indignity of her outburst only made me look more composed. It's our home. Where are we supposed to go? I hear the garage is available, I said. It has a space heater. You'll be fine. It's just until you get back on your feet. Don't be so dramatic. Ashley burst into tears, ugly, heaving sobs that smeared her expensive mascara. Mark just stared at the envelope, defeated. Mom, he tried one last time. The deal. The $5 million. Surely. Family. The deal is dead, Mark, Henderson said, standing up. The Sterling Group does not do business with people who abuse the elderly. It's bad for the brand. Check, please, I said to Henry. It is already taken care of, madam, Henri said with a bow. Your usual table is ready for dessert, if you wish to move away from the disturbance. Thank you, Henry. I stood up. I smoothed my crimson silk skirt. I looked down at my daughter and her husband one last time. "You wanted a life of luxury," I told them. "You wanted to be served. Well, here is your service. You have been served with an eviction notice. Enjoy the walk home." It stopped raining, but it's still quite cold. "But our car?" Mark stammered. "We drove here." "Did you?" I raised an eyebrow. "I believe that SUV is leased in my name, as a co-signer." Mark nodded dumbly. "James," I said into my phone, "repo the SUV. It's in the valet lot." "Done, madam," came the reply in my ear. "You'll find the valet ticket is no longer valid," I told Mark. "I suggest you call a bus. I hear the route to Elm Street is quite scenic this time of year." I turned my back on them. I walked away, flanked by my executives, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. Behind me, I heard Ashley sobbing my name. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. I walked to the private elevator, pressed the button for the penthouse, and ascended. The test was over, the lesson had been delivered, and as the doors closed, shutting out the sight of their ruin, I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. I was Margaret Sterling, and I was finally done playing the victim. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was smooth, silent, and swift, the exact opposite of the journey my daughter and her husband were currently undertaking. As the doors slid open to my sanctuary, I walked straight to the window. From this height, the people on the street were just ants, scurrying about their business. But I didn't need binoculars to imagine the scene unfolding 40 floors below. Down on the street, the reality of their situation was hitting Mark and Ashley with the force of a physical blow. They stood under the awning of the Ritz, shivering as the November wind whipped around the corner. Mark fumbled for his phone, his fingers shaking. "I'll call an Uber," he muttered, tapping furiously. "We'll go home, figure this out. She's bluffing. She has to be bluffing." He tapped the screen. He frowned. He tapped again. "Declined?" he whispered, staring at the notification. "Payment method declined." "Try the other card," Ashley snapped, hugging her arms around herself, her expensive makeup streaking down her cheeks. "The platinum one." "I did. That was the platinum one." Mark's voice rose to a panic pitch. "It says card suspended by issuer." "Try mine." Ashley dug her phone out of her clutch. 30 seconds later, she let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. "Mine too. They're all gone." "Mark," she canceled everything. The valet captain, a man who had witnessed thousands of dramas but knew better than to intervene, stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling? Your vehicle has been retrieved by the leasing agency. They arrived 10 minutes ago with a tow truck." "Retrieved?" Mark choked. "But my golf clubs were in the trunk." "I believe the agency will hold personal items for 30 days, sir," the valet said impassively. "Please move aside. You are blocking the entrance for guests." Guests. The word hung in the air, a sharp reminder of their new status. They weren't guests, they were loiterers. "We have to walk," Mark said, looking at the gray, threatening sky. It's 5 miles, Ash." "I can't walk 5 miles in these heels," Ashley shrieked. "I'll blister, my feet will bleed." "Then take them off," Mark snapped, his facade of the doting husband finally crumbling under the weight of his own incompetence. "God, Ashley, this is your mother. How did you not know? How did you live with a billionaire for 30 years and think she was a broke widow?" "Me?" Ashley recoiled, her face twisting. "You're the one who treated her like a maid. Put her in the garage, you said. She smells like mothballs, you said. You agreed with me. I'm your wife. I was supporting you." They stood there on the sidewalk, screaming at each other, two people who had built a life on the foundation of my money, watching it collapse in real time. Passers-by stared. A tourist took a photo. Finally, defeated by the cold and the staring eyes, they turned and began the long trudge down the avenue. Ashley hobbled, her expensive shoes clicking unevenly on the pavement. Mark walked 3 feet ahead of her, hands in his pockets, looking like a man marching to the gallows. It started to rain again, a cold, miserable drizzle. Back in the penthouse, I turned away from the window. James was standing by the bar, pouring a glass of vintage cognac. He handed it to me. "The security team at the Elm Street property reports that the locks are scheduled to be changed at noon tomorrow, madam," he said, his voice steady. Moving trucks have been ordered to clear the premises of their personal effects. We will place them in storage, per your instructions. No, I said, taking a sip of the amber liquid. The burn was pleasant. Change of plans, James. Madam? Don't put their things in storage. Put them on the lawn. James paused, a flicker of surprise crossing his stoic face, followed quickly by a glint of approval. The lawn. Very good. And the weather report predicts heavy rain tomorrow evening. Then they better pack quickly, I said calmly. I walked over to the fireplace, where a cheerful fire was crackling. I sat down in the wingback chair, feeling the warmth seep into my bones. For 3 months, I had been cold from the drafty guest room, cold from the lack of heating in the car, cold from the icy indifference of my own child. Now finally I was warm. But the warmth wasn't just physical, it was the heat of clarity. I picked up my phone. There were 12 missed calls from Ashley and 7 from Mark. Then came the texts. Mom, please pick up. Mom, we're walking. It's raining. Mom, Mark didn't mean it. Mom, I'm your daughter. I read them, one by one. I didn't feel the urge to reply. I didn't feel the guilt that used to plague me every time I told her no when she was a child. I scrolled to the bottom of the contact list and pressed block caller. Then I did the same for Mark. James, I said, staring into the fire. Yes, Mrs. Sterling? Do we still own that small cottage in Vermont? The one with the drafty windows and the wood-burning stove? The one I used to take Ashley to when she was a little girl, before she got complicated? We do, madam. It is currently vacant. Good, I murmured. Keep it that way. I might want to visit. I find I'm developing a taste for the simple life, but this time, I'll bring my own firewood. The phone buzzed again. It wasn't a text. It was an email notification from my lawyer, attached to the deed transfer confirmation. Subject, Elm Street property, reversion complete. I smiled. They had the long walk home to think about what they had done. They had 24 hours to salvage their clothes and their video games. And after that? Well, Mark had said he wanted to build a future. I was just giving him the opportunity to build it from scratch, without my bricks. James, I said, setting the glass down, order dinner, something rich, something expensive, and order a second portion. For a guest, madam? No, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. For me, because I can. The lesson wasn't over yet. Tomorrow was eviction day, and I intended to be there to supervise. The rain arrived at 11 a.m., right on schedule. It wasn't a storm, it was a cold, gray, relentless drizzle that turned the world the color of slate. I sat in the back of the Bentley, parked across the street from the house on Elm Street. I watched the windshield wipers slice back and forth, counting the seconds until noon. James sat in the driver's seat, silent as a statue. Beside him lay a clipboard with the itemized list of the property's contents. Outside, the activity was already frantic. I had hired a crew from my own logistics division men who usually moved pianos and fine art. They moved with a terrifying silent efficiency. The front door of the colonial house was propped open. Mark and Ashley were running back and forth like ants whose hill had been kicked over. They looked terrible. Ashley's hair, usually a pristine blowout, was frizzy and damp, plastered to her skull. She was wearing sweatpants and the same silk blouse from yesterday, now wrinkled and stained. Mark was in jeans and a t-shirt, his face unshaven, eyes wild and bloodshot. They were dragging boxes, suitcases, and armfuls of clothes out onto the porch. They were trying to beat the clock, but the clock, like the house, belonged to me. At 11:55 a.m., a large white truck pulled up. It wasn't a moving van for them. It was the donation collection service I had scheduled. And right behind it, the locksmith's van. I opened the car door. James was there instantly with the umbrella, shielding me from the wet. "Shall we, madam?" "We shall, James." I crossed the street, my heels clicking on the wet asphalt. I stopped at the end of the driveway. The lawn, the manicured emerald green lawn that Mark was so proud of, the one he paid a service $500 a month to maintain while I ate tomato soup, was currently being decorated, but not with garden gnomes. It was being piled high with the detritus of their lifestyle. There was the white Italian leather sofa, custom order, $8,000. It sat askew on the wet grass, rapidly darkening with rain. There was the 85-inch flat-screen TV, leaning precariously against a maple tree. There were piles of designer clothes, Gucci, Prada, Balenciaga, heaped in garbage bags that had split open, spilling silk and cashmere onto the mud. Ashley came stumbling out the front door, clutching a vase. When she saw me standing at the end of the driveway, looking like the Grim Reaper in a trench coat, she froze. "Mom!" she screamed, abandoning the vase on the porch steps and running down the driveway. She stopped 5 feet away, blocked by James's imposing presence. "You can't do this," she wailed, gesturing at the sodden lawn. "Look at it. It's getting ruined. The sofa is ruined." "It's leather, Ashley," I said calmly. "Cows live outside. It'll be fine." "This is cruel." Mark appeared behind her, carrying a desktop computer tower. He looked exhausted, broken. "Margaret, please. Just let us keep the house for a week, just to pack properly. We have nowhere to go." "You have the garage," I reminded him, pointing to the detached structure a few yards away. The door was open, revealing the cold, oil-stained concrete floor and the rusty lawnmower. "It's dry in there, and I believe you mentioned it has a space heater? It should be quite cozy." Mark flinched. The memory of his own words, thrown at me just 48 hours ago, hit him like a physical slap. "We didn't mean it like that," he mumbled, looking at his shoes. "You meant exactly that," I corrected. "You meant that I was disposable. You meant that my comfort was irrelevant compared to your ambition." Now, the roles are reversed. I checked my watch. It is 12 p.m. The eviction notice has expired. "James?" James nodded and signaled to the locksmith, who was waiting by the porch. "Change them," James said. "Front, back, and side." The locksmith moved. Mark made a move to stop him, but 2 of my logistics men stepped forward, arms crossed. They were large men. Mark stopped. "You're taking the house?" Ashley sobbed, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "But what about our things? We can't take all of this. We don't have a truck. We don't even have a car." "The donation truck is here," I pointed to the white van. "They will take whatever you leave behind. I suggest you prioritize." "Prioritize?" Ashley laughed hysterically. "My life is on this lawn. My clothes, my jewelry." "Your jewelry?" I asked. "You mean the pieces I bought you, or the ones you bought with the credit cards I paid off?" She went silent. "Pack what you can carry," I said coldly. "You have 2 hands. Use them." I walked past them, up the driveway, and onto the porch. I wanted to see the inside one last time, to make sure the ghost of the bag lady was gone. I stepped into the foyer. It was chaotic, filled with half-packed boxes and trash. But the bones of the house, the high ceilings, the crown molding, the hardwood floors were still beautiful. This was the house I had bought for them to raise a family in, to build a life. And they had turned it into a shrine, to their own greed. I walked into the kitchen. The dirty dishes from 3 days ago were still in the sink. The counter was sticky. I remembered scrubbing this floor on my knees. I walked to the guest room, the storage closet. The cot was still there. The thin, scratchy blanket was wad up in the corner. I stepped inside. It smelled of mildew and despair. I stood there for a moment, honoring the woman who had slept there, the woman who had hoped, against all odds, that her daughter loved her. That woman was dead. I had mourned her, and now I was burying her. I walked out of the closet and closed the door. "Lock it," I told the locksmith, who was working on the back door, "and throw away the key." I walked back out to the front porch. The rain had picked up. It was a steady, drumming downpour now. Mark and Ashley were frantically trying to cover the TV with a tarp they had found. The white sofa was soaked, water pooling in the tufted buttons. They looked like refugees of their own making. "Mom," Ashley called out from the lawn, shivering violently. "Please, just a hotel room. Please, I'm cold." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the little girl who wanted the blue pony. I saw the teenager who crashed the car. I saw the woman who told me I smelled like mothballs. "It is cold," I agreed. November is a cruel month. I reached into my purse. Ashley's eyes lit up. She thought I was reaching for my checkbook, or a credit card, or cash. She took a step forward, her hands out, ready to take. I pulled out a small folded piece of paper. "Here," I said, holding it out. James took it and walked it down the driveway to her. Ashley grabbed it, unfolding it with desperate, trembling fingers. "What is this?" she whispered, staring at it. "It's a bus schedule," I said. "The number 42 stops at the corner in 10 minutes. It goes downtown. There's a shelter on 5th Street. They take walk-ins." Ashley crumpled the paper, screaming in frustration, throwing it into the mud. "I hate you," she shrieked. "I hate you. You're a witch. You're ruining my life." "No, Ashley," I said, opening my umbrella as I stepped off the porch. "I'm not ruining your life. I'm just stopping the subsidy. You're 30 years old. It's time to start living the life you can actually afford." I walked past them. I didn't look at the sofa. I didn't look at the TV. I looked straight ahead, at the black Bentley waiting for me. Mark didn't say a word. He was just staring at the house, watching the locksmith tighten the final screw on the front door. He knew it was over. He knew the locks were changed, not just on the house, but on the bank vault that was his mother-in-law. I got into the car. James closed the door, sealing out the rain and the screaming. "Where to, madam?" James asked. "The airport, James," I said. "The jet is waiting. I believe the climate in Tuscany is much more agreeable this time of year." As we pulled away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to see them standing in the rain. I knew exactly what they looked like. They looked like two people who had just learned the most expensive lesson of their lives. And the tuition? It was everything they had. 6 months later, the view from my balcony was very different. Instead of the gray, rain-slicked streets of the city, I looked out over the rolling, sun-drenched hills of Tuscany. The air smelled of warm earth, cypress, and wild rosemary. I sat at a wrought iron table, a glass of Sangiovese in my hand, reviewing the quarterly reports for the European division of Sterling Hotels. Profits were up 15%. My phone buzzed on the table. It wasn't a frantic text from a daughter demanding money. It was a notification from James. Monthly status report. Subject A&M. I hesitated for a moment. When I first arrived in Italy, I checked these reports daily, fueled by a lingering, bitter need to see them suffer. Now, I check them only out of a vague, distant curiosity, like reading about a minor weather event in a country you used to visit. I opened the file. The photos were grainy, taken from a distance, but the story they told was high-definition tragedy. The first photo showed a dingy apartment complex on the outskirts of the city, the kind with peeling paint and barred windows. It was a far cry from Elm Street. Subject A, Ashley, was pictured leaving the building. She wasn't wearing Gucci. She was wearing a generic uniform, a black polo shirt, and khaki pants. Her hair, once her crowning glory, was pulled back in a messy, utilitarian ponytail. She looked tired. She looked 10 years older. The caption read, "Employment, hostess at Big Al's Diner, shift, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. I zoomed in on her face. There was no arrogance left there, just exhaustion. The girl who had screamed because the pony wasn't blue was now seating truckers and wiping down sticky menus for minimum wage. The next photo was of Mark. He was standing in a car lot, wearing a cheap suit that fit poorly. He was gesturing wildly at a customer who looked unimpressed. Employment, junior sales associate, discount auto mart, performance, below average, commission only. I scrolled down to the notes. Subjects are currently cohabitating in a basement studio apartment. Approx 400 SQFT. Neighbors report frequent domestic disturbances. Arguments primarily center on finances and blame allocation. A basement studio, essentially, a garage with plumbing. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had banished me to a cold concrete box to save their image. Now, they were living in one to survive. I swiped to the next attachment. It was a transcript of a voicemail Ashley had left on my old number, the one I never answered, but James monitored for security threats. I pressed play. "Mom?" Her voice was thin, cracking. "Mom, I know you blocked me. I know you're gone. I saw a lady today at the diner who looked like you. She ordered tomato soup." A pause, a ragged intake of breath. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Mark left me yesterday. He said he only married me for the inheritance. He said I tricked him. He took the TV and the last of the cash. Mom, I'm alone. I'm scared. Please. I don't want money. I just want to come home." The recording ended. I stared at the Italian sunset, the orange light bleeding into the purple hills. Mark had left her. Of course he had. He was a parasite. When the host body runs dry, the tick detaches and looks for new blood. Ashley was alone. She was working a hard job. She was humbled. A part of me, the old part, the mother who bought the blue pony, twitched. "She's suffering," it whispered. "Send a plane, pay the rent, fix it." But then I remembered the rain. I remembered the look on her face when she told me I smelled like mothballs. I remembered the absolute, chilling ease with which she had discarded me when she thought I was useless. If I saved her now, she would never learn. She would just learn that if she cried hard enough, Mommy would fix it. She would become the monster again. I needed her to become a human being first. "James," I called out. James stepped onto the balcony, holding a fresh bottle of wine. "Madam?" "Mark has left her," I said. "I am aware, madam. He is currently staying on a friend's couch in Jersey City." "Good. Keep watching him. If he tries to approach any of our properties or contacts, I want a restraining order filed immediately." "Understood." "And regarding Ashley?" I looked at the photo of my daughter in her waitress uniform. She looked miserable, but for the first time in her life, she also looked real. She was earning her bread. She was standing on her own feet, however shaky they were. "Leave her," I said softly. "She's building character. It's a slow process. Shall I delete the voicemail?" "No," I said. "Archive it. Save it for the future. Maybe one day, when she's actually ready to be a daughter and not a dependent, we'll listen to it together." I took a sip of wine. "But not today, James. Today, I have a date." James allowed himself a very small smile. "Mr. Conti will be arriving at 7, madam." "Excellent." I stood up, turning my back on the photos of my daughter's ruin. I had a life to live. I had a vineyard to tour tomorrow. I had a handsome Italian architect taking me to dinner tonight. I had spent 30 years being a mother. Now, finally, I was just Margaret. And Margaret was having a wonderful time. 3 years. That's how long it took for me to set foot in New York again. I wasn't avoiding it out of fear. I was avoiding it because I was too busy living. I had spent the last 36 months expanding the Sterling brand into the vineyards of France and the coasts of Greece. I had learned Italian. I had learned to dance the tango. I had even learned how to date again, finding a companionship that was based on mutual respect, not a checkbook. But today, business brought me back. The occasion was the grand opening of the Sterling Shelter, a state-of-the-art transitional housing facility for women and elderly people who had been victims of financial abuse. It was my passion project, built on the very block where I had once sat in a Bentley, watching my daughter cry over a wet sofa. The irony was intentional. The gala was being held in the shelter's main hall, which had been decorated to look like a ballroom. The city's elite were there, the mayor, the donors, the press. I stood at the podium, wearing a cream-colored suit that radiated quiet power. I finished my speech, applause washing over me. "And remember," I said, leaning into the microphone, "dignity is not a luxury item. It is a right, but sometimes you have to fight to get it back." I stepped down, accepting handshakes and flashes from cameras. James was at my elbow, as always, guiding me through the crowd. "Madam," he whispered, leaning close, "we have a situation at the service entrance." "A situation?" "A man. He claims to be family. He is demanding to see you. Security has detained him." I sighed, a small puff of annoyance. "Mark." "Indeed." "He appears unwell." "Show me." James led me away from the glittering crowd, through the kitchen, to the loading dock area. There, held back by 2 burly security guards, was Mark. If I hadn't known him, I wouldn't have recognized him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, hungry twitchiness. His suit was cheap and ill-fitting, stained at the collar. His hair was thinning. He looked like a man who had spent 3 years chasing get-rich-quick schemes and catching nothing but bad luck. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with a manic hope. "Margaret! Mom!" he shouted, struggling against the guards. Tell them who I am. I'm family. I helped build this empire." I stopped 10 feet away, the cool night air of the loading dock biting at my skin. "You are not family, Mark," I said calmly, "and you didn't build anything. You tried to sell the foundation for scrap." "I made a mistake," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Ashley, she was crazy. She drove me to it. I left her, Margaret. I knew she was toxic. I'm a free agent now. I have ideas. I have a pitch for you. Just 5 minutes." "You left her," I repeated, my voice dropping to absolute zero. "You left her when the money ran out. That doesn't make you a victim, Mark. It makes you a rat." I looked at the security guard. "This man has a restraining order against him, filed by the Sterling Group legal team 3 years ago. He is currently violating it." "Margaret, no," Mark screamed as the guards tightened their grip. "I'm destitute. I'm living in a motel. You owe me. I was your son-in-law." "You were a lesson," I corrected. "A very expensive one. But I've paid my tuition." I nodded to the guards. "Call the police. Have him removed." "You witch! You old witch!" Mark's screams faded as they dragged him out toward the street, his voice cracking with the impotence of a man who still blamed everyone but himself. I watched him go, feeling nothing. No pity, no anger, just the mild satisfaction of taking out the trash. I turned to go back inside, but James stopped me. "Madam," he said softly, "there is one more thing." He gestured toward the catering staff. They were busy loading empty trays into a van, moving quickly, heads down. "The catering company," James said, "they hire people in transition. Second chances." I looked, and then I saw her. She was carrying a heavy crate of glassware. She wore a black uniform that was a size too big, her hair pulled back in a hairnet, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. Her hands were red and chapped. It was Ashley. She looked older. There were fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. She wasn't moving with the languid, entitled grace of a socialite anymore. She was moving with the efficient, tired rhythm of a worker. She set the crate down and wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. Then, she looked up and saw me. She froze. For a moment, the loading dock was silent, mother and daughter, separated by 30 feet of concrete and 3 years of silence. I waited for the scream. I waited for the "it's not fair," or the "give me money." But Ashley didn't scream. She looked at my suit. She looked at James. Then she looked at her own rough hands. She took a deep breath, straightened her back, and picked up the crate again. "Hello, Mom," she said. Her voice was quiet. It wasn't angry. It sounded tired and real. "Hello, Ashley," I replied. "I saw the speech on the monitor in the kitchen," she said, shifting the weight of the crate. "It was good. You built a nice place here." "Thank you." She hesitated, biting her lip. I heard Mark was here. I saw them drag him out." "He was. He's an idiot," she said flatly. "He still thinks the world owes him a living." "And you?" I asked. "Do you think the world owes you a living?" Ashley looked me in the eye. For the first time in her life, her gaze was steady. "No," she said. "I earn my living now. It's $15 an hour plus tips, but I earn it." She glanced at the van where her supervisor was waving at her to hurry up. "I have to go," she said. "We have another event to prep for tomorrow." She took a step toward the van, then stopped. "Mom?" "Yes?" "I'm sorry," she whispered. "About the garage. About everything. I didn't know. I didn't know what it cost to be you, I think. I think I'm starting to understand." She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask to come home. She just apologized, turned around, and loaded the crate into the van. I watched her. "James," I said, my voice thick. "Shall I call her back, madam? Shall we offer her a position?" I watched my daughter wipe her hands on her apron and climb into the passenger seat of the catering van. She looked exhausted, but she didn't look broken. She looked like someone who was finally growing up. "No, James," I said softly. "Not yet. She's doing the work. Let her finish it." I reached into my purse and pulled out a checkbook. But find out who owns that catering company, I said, writing quickly. Send them an anonymous donation. Earmark it for employee bonus. Make sure it's enough to cover, say, a deposit on a decent apartment. I handed the check to James. Anonymous, James. If she knows it's from me, it ruins the lesson. Understood, madam. The catering van pulled away, merging into the New York traffic. I watched it go until the taillights disappeared. I had lost the spoiled child I raised. But somewhere out there, in the grind of the city, I might just be gaining a daughter I could respect. I turned back to the warmth of the gala. The music was playing. I had a business to run. And for the first time, the future didn't look lonely. It looked earned. The fire in the stone hearth crackled, spitting a shower of sparks against the iron screen. Outside, the snow was falling softly, blanketing the Vermont woods in a hush of white. I sat in the worn leather armchair of the small cottage I had told James to keep. It wasn't the Ritz-Carlton. There were no golden faucets, no room service, and the wind rattled the window panes. But it was mine, and it was warm. James walked in from the small kitchen, carrying a tray with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. He wasn't wearing his chauffeur's uniform. He was wearing a thick wool sweater and jeans. The report from New York came in, he said quietly, placing the tray on the ottoman. And? Mark was sentenced yesterday, James said, sitting in the chair opposite me. Fraud, embezzlement. It seems he tried to run a Ponzi scheme with the few investors he had left after you blacklisted him. 5 years. I took a sip of the chocolate. It was rich and sweet. 5 years. He wanted a free ride his whole life. Now the state will provide one. And Ashley? James smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. She used the anonymous bonus check. She didn't buy a purse, madam. She didn't go on vacation. What did she do? She put a deposit down on a studio apartment in Queens, near the catering company, and she enrolled in night classes, business management. I felt a lump form in my throat. It wasn't grief this time. It was pride. Small, fragile, but real. She's learning, I whispered. She is, James agreed. She called your old number again yesterday. She didn't ask for money. She just left a message saying, "Thank you for the lesson." I looked out the window at the falling snow. For 30 years, I thought my job as a mother was to clear the path for my daughter, to shovel away the snow so she never had to feel the cold. I was wrong. My job was to teach her how to walk in it. When I walked away from that house in the rain, when I chose the Ritz over the garage, I wasn't abandoning her. I was saving both of us. I was saving her from becoming a monster of entitlement. And I was saving myself from becoming a martyr. I looked at James. For 20 years, he had been an employee. In the last 3 years, he had become my rock, my confidant, and my dearest friend. You know, James, I said, I think I'm done with the madam business. We're in a cabin in Vermont. It feels a bit pretentious. He raised his mug in a toast. As you wish, Margaret. I smiled. My life isn't what I expected it to be at 70. I don't have a big family gathering around a table. I don't have a daughter who calls me every Sunday to gossip. But I have peace. I have dignity, and I have the absolute certainty that the people in my life are there because they want to be, not because I'm paying them. I learned that you can't buy love. But you can certainly pay a high price for the illusion of it. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the snow cover the path to the driveway. The Bentley was parked there, a dark shape under a white blanket. I didn't need to go anywhere. I had arrived. So, I ask you, have you ever held on to a relationship with a child, a partner, a friend, simply because you were afraid of what would happen if you stopped paying the toll? Have you ever been afraid to close the bank of mom because you feared the account was otherwise empty? It's a terrifying thing to close that account, to walk out into the rain. But I promise you, the warmth you find on the other side, it's worth every penny. Tell me your story in the comments. Because sometimes, the only way to find out who really loves you is to see who stays when the music stops and the lights go out. Thank you for listening to my story.